the tribunal had not had an opportunity to visit these particular crime sites before. And so the trial enabled the judges and the prosecution and the defense to in person visit these crime sites for the very first time in Croatia. It gave the tribunal an opportunity to bear witness to those crimes. And so it was a very intense, very emotional thing to do this when I accompanied the judges and the prosecution and the defense. And I'll just relate one incident right now. One of the crimes, one of the specific incidents that was charged in the Hadjic indictment had to do with what's called the Lovas minefield. And on 18 October 1991, the local Serb forces took 50 Croatian and other non-Serb detainees who had been captured and were prisoners of war. They took them to a minefield outside of the village of Lovas. And they lined them up and they made them walk across the minefield to demine the field. And one of the reasons why there were lots of reasons why they did this. They wanted to get rid of the detainees. They also wanted to save ammunition. And they wanted to demine the field. So this for them was a win-win-win for them. 22 of those 50 detainees were killed in that incident, and the survivors were forced to bury all of the deceased detainees in a mass grave. And so it was incidents like that where the tribunal had not had an opportunity to visit those sites in person. So I thought that was very important that the tribunal got to do that and then preserve the evidence and the historical record of what happened there. It's one thing reading about these things. It's quite another thing to be in the courtroom hearing the witnesses give evidence, and it's yet another thing to be there where it actually happened. So, I think this is part of the human experience and the human psyche. But during the site visit, during the Hadjic trial, physically examining the crime sites did leave quite an impression. People were being displaced in Bosnia, and one of the things that the United Nations did was it would set up safe havens in certain areas. And Srebrenica was a UN-protected safe haven. Yeah, at least it was supposed to be. So there were a lot of Bosnian Muslims who had gathered there at Srebrenica. In July 1995, the army of Republika Srpska, they surrounded the UN safe haven and then they overrode it. And this was in eastern Bosnia. When they overrode the safe haven, they separated the able-bodied men and boys and from the women, children, and elderly. And then they took the men and the boys away and they executed them and then buried them in mass graves. And they killed about 7,000 men and boys that had sought protection in Srebrenica. And then they took the women and the children and the elderly and they forcibly displaced them from the area. This was a genocide. And it was ruled so by the tribunal in several cases. Over 1,000 witnesses came to give evidence before the ICTY in the Srebrenica trials. About 20 people were indicted for crimes at Srebrenica, and many of them were convicted. And it's commonly considered one of the darkest chapters in European history since World War II.